got it. There he is.
I'm old. I need the glasses to see the phone now. For fuck's sake.
Are you at the Bridge production studio right now?
I sure am.
Nice, dude. Well, I'd like to welcome everybody to the Leedz Edutainment Podcast. We got a special guest today. Someone I've known for a while, Mr. Slaine. How are you, my friend? Thanks for joining us.
I've known you 2-3 years.
2-3? 2-3?
2-3 years. I got an archetype helping me with all the technical things.
Is this your first time doing one of these things?
I did an IG live once.
All right. Just once, huh?
Just once.
Yeah. Johnny Dangerously? My mom did that once.
Just once. What was that? Joe Piscopo, right?
Yeah, Joe Piscopo. That's a classic. 80s comedy classic. But anyways, well, thank you for doing this. We know it's good to be working together again. We got the show coming up next Friday with Master Ace, Slaine.
Yeah, man.
Master Ace, OT the Real, XL the Beast.
Dude, I don't think I haven't had butterflies about a show in so long. I mean, I do this long enough. I think I get them like right before I go on stage, the adrenaline surge. But
yeah,
I mean, there's never been any point in my life since I started doing this where I went this long without performing live. It's just crazy.
Yeah. I remember one time one of our early shows was at the Western Front, and they had that old school marquee, and you had your name up there. And you were bugging out about that. You're like, dude, I'm so nervous. My name's in the marquee. And it was the Western Front.
I mean, dude, you've seen it from all the way up. You know what I'm saying? So, I mean, I remember standing on a porch in Brockton, and I was like on a bender, and you asked me like, yo, how would you feel about opening up for EPMD? I don't think that show happened, but
Paris Smith. You opened for Paris Smith.
Was that what it was?
Yeah,
and I was
Harper's
like, yeah, I'm down.
Well, I want to take people back a little bit for those that don't know. My recollection is that you were born all over. You lived all over Boston growing up, right? You lived in multiple areas, right?
Yeah, I lived in a lot. I'm from Dorchester originally, so I was born at St. Margaret's Hospital in 1977, grew up in the Adams Corner area.
Yeah.
And then I moved around a lot after that. And, you know, like when my parents got divorced, I was kind of like a latchkey kid. I would go in between the houses. So my dad lived in South Boston. My mother moved around a lot. And kind of by default, man, because, you know, when I was like 13 or 14, my high school sweetheart, who ended up being my son's mother, she lived in Rosendale. And that was like my home because there was a lot of stability in her house. And and it was like my family, you know what I'm saying? It's, you know, so that ended up being kind of the neighborhood. Like, even though I wasn't really technically from there, that was like the neighborhood that kind of was my adopted home. So I always loved Rosendale. But, you know, I'm from Dorchester originally, and deep roots, and lived probably the most I've ever lived anywhere was South Boston. But I've lived in like, you know, 30 different apartments in my life.
Yeah, and warehouses and couches and a few other different places.
But I think that ended up really kind of helping me out when I was coming up, because I knew so many people from all over the city.
Yeah.
And it just kind of helped spread the word. Like a lot of people were riding for me when I was first coming up. I don't know if you remember that, but it was like,
oh, I do.
The mixtape really started when we did that White Man is the Devil Volume 1 mixtape. That just started spreading like wildfire out the city. So that was cool.
Yeah. So and then when did you start rapping? Like, I remember you vaguely talking about this. It was, how old? 13, 12?
No, I started writing rhymes. So after I heard the Beastie Boys License to Ill tape, I was 9 years old, and I wrote my first rhyme. And
nice.
I used to write rhymes, but I never told anybody until years and years later. So by the time I had ever rapped for anybody or showed anybody my lyrics, I already been doing it for like 7 or 8 years.
Right.
My mother said she found like a shoebox. Like, I literally kept it secret from everybody. Nobody knew that I wrote rhymes, but I started doing it like when I was 9 years old. So I think I'm like 35 years deep writing rhymes now.
Damn.
It's probably the longest I've ever stuck to anything, that I've ever done anything.
Yeah, it surpassed drinking.
It actually, yeah, it passed drinking and drugs. And the two of them used to go hand in hand.
Oh, I know. We'll get into that in a few. When did you move to New York? Because I think this is a important part of your upcoming in rap world. Because you moved to New York and you link with MC Shan as a manager, correct?
Yeah, well, it was kind of a longer story than that, but
Oh,
yeah, I moved to New York. You know, I was already having trouble with the drugs and alcohol, like
yeah,
from I was when I was 14, 15, and I
yep.
semi cleaned up after high school. I
Selfie
grad
sober.
yeah, I graduated from high school, and I took a year to kind of clean up my act, and then I started applying to colleges, and I went to School of Visual Arts for film in New York City. And when I got there, you know, like I said, I hadn't really like rhymed on stage or anything. Like nobody even knew. A couple of my friends, like I would spit rhymes to and stuff like that, but it wasn't really an acceptable thing back then. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like,
Being a white guy.
yeah, being a white guy, especially like with the, you know, in the kind of areas I grew up around, it was like, you know
Yeah,
what I'm saying? It wasn't cool at all. You know what I'm saying?
yeah.
Um,
I get it.
I mean, it was like House of Pain was cool. We looked up to them and everything, but it wasn't really, you know, I wasn't like freestyling on the corner when I was a teenager. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
That came when I got to New York. And when I got to New York, I realized that I was good because I would go down to like the New Eurekan Poets Cafe to the open mics there. My friend Cypher, who I was rhyming with at the time, it was like my first rap group, Bad Habits, it was called.
Yeah.
And he signed me up for the open mic, and I was like, you know, terrified to go up. And I did my thing, and it was kind of like a growing process like that, going into rock the stage for the first time, freestyling on corners, and then ultimately going into the studio for the first time. And yeah, man, it's crazy. It all goes by in the blink of an eye. But you know, I remember those first shows and the first time going up on stage and
Yeah.
having those butterflies that I'm talking about now. Like it's like, you know, something becomes second nature to you for so long. So who would have ever thought we'd go like 2 years without rocking? It's just insane. But
Yeah. So where'd you meet Shan?
so I started going to this studio in Jamaica, Queens, and I was like recording demo tapes there and stuff. And this dude Reynard, who had the studio, he played some of my stuff to Shan. So Shan started coming by the studio, and then Shan started managing me, and you know, we made a demo tape and took it into like Tommy Boy and RCA and a bunch of stuff. And I had like my first meetings with record labels, and that kind of fell apart. Like, you know. I was young, man. You know, I was like 19 years old or whatever, and I had like different ideas of how it should go. And Shan wanted me to sign a contract. I talked to Shan recently, like a couple of years ago. Me and him were good, but it didn't materialize. I don't think you know, there was some business
Yeah.
stuff that I wasn't aware of or ready for at the time, and it just
Yeah.
was what it was. And I moved. I lived in New York for 5 years doing that, and then when I moved back. That's kind of when I kind of thought that it was over after I left New York. I was like, well, you know, I gave it a shot. That was cool. What am I going to do now? And I came back to Boston, and, you know, everybody, that was like kind of the beginning of the drug epidemic was really starting to ramp up. And,
Oxys.
yeah. And everybody I grew up with was doing the oxys, but I mean, it was everything too. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, we started doing hard drugs at a young age. And then when I got back to Boston, shit, I can't remember like how long it took or whatever. Like I still was writing rhymes and recording and stuff like that. But oh yeah, so that was when we did. I don't know, like
Well,
some people
there's
have it.
one thing I want to back up to because I think this is prior to the Boston stuff. Is when did you link up with DJ Lethal and Danny Boy with the Knockouts? Where does that play into this? Because that was already established before we met.
Yeah, so that was 2003. So I moved back to Boston in '01,
Yeah.
kind of right before 9/11.
Yeah.
I was working at Emerson College, and I started working with G Squared, and I started this record label with a partner I had back in the day. Also, a situation that kind of didn't work out on a
Yeah.
business tip. It was called Bad Moon Records, and if anybody has that old CD with my sneaker on the cover, like with my reflection in the puddle of blood, it's
Yeah.
called Never Gonna Die, and that was like the first thing.
Yep. That was a
Um,
banger.
yeah, it was the first thing that ever came out. Was that the first time you heard my shit?
Yeah, I heard that joint on a Jay Saki Best of the Bean mixtape. Parker played it for me. I was like, "Yo, what's this?" But the reason I made a big deal about it was the track was dope because I had heard that there was this white kid from South Boston who was working with DJ Lethal and Danny Boy. I was like, "Oh, word!" Being a House of Pain fan, I checked you out from there. But that's why I kind of go back to the Lethal thing because that was
Yeah, so
that
that
was
came a little
huge.
bit. That came a little bit after that. So, you know, I had worked with Danny Boy,
So did
and
you meet Danny Boy or Lethal first?
so I met Danny Boy through Caves from Lords of Brooklyn. So when I was in New York, I was going to Lords of Brooklyn studio, and
Yep.
I was recording with ADM and Caves. Caves actually gave me my name, Slaine. I used to go by John Doe before that.
John
And
Doe,
I
nice.
mean, there's still people from New York from the '90s that, like, when they see me and haven't seen me, they're, oh, yo, what up, John Doe? And
John Doe of Bad Habits.
yeah, yeah. So
Great.
yeah, so I actually met Danny Boy at CBGB's in New York, and yeah, I mean, I was drinking at the time, and he wasn't. He was sober, and I remember being super disappointed. And like, he was like 2 years sober at the time or something like that. And I remember being like, I wanted to have a beer with Danny Boy.
Yeah.
And yeah, so time went by, and I connected with Danny, and then I went out to LA and I started working with Lethal, and Lethal was working with a couple other kids at the time. Big Left was one of them, and this other dude Opto.
Yeah.
So we started doing like solo tracks initially, but then since he had us all at the same time, we started all recording together, and that was kind of like the early phases of La Coka Nostra.
Yep.
Before it became what it ultimately became.
Yep.
It was me, Lefty, Opto. We were all recording with Lethal. We record like 17, 19 songs. It was the Knockout Kings and the
Yep.
Knockout whatever. And I think it was always kind of in search of a name, like the right name. And Danny called over to the studio and was like, how's it going over there? And we were getting it in. We were all, especially me, like I was doing what I did back then, and he was like, Lefty, how's it going? And Lefty's like, we got a regular La Cosa Nostra over here. It's like, and he's like, yeah, you don't chill out, you're gonna call you La Coka Nostra. And that was kind of the beginning of the name.
Yeah.
He started drawing up logos for it,
Yeah.
and I think after that kind of fizzled actually. There
Yeah.
was like we had a bunch of hype around it, and then it fizzled.
Yeah.
And I came back home, and then I went back out there again, and that was kind of the time when Bill came into the picture, and then Everlast came into the fray, and we all started recording together. So it was a magical time, man.
Yeah, I want to just go back a little bit in between there because in between Knockout Kings and La Coka Nostra is you finally putting out your first project, White Man is the Devil, Volume 1 and 2. This is where me, you, and Parker link up. We do the mixtape, and those songs, and there's a lot of that Knockout Kings on that Volume 1, but those songs, for people that don't know, man, this is when I meet you. We're all getting messed up, drinking, getting high, whatever. I mean, that first mixtape that we did, I mean, your mentality at that point, you were just this ferocious monster coming out of Boston with a sound that really wasn't being done yet. People were kind of didn't do the white Boston rapper yet, and that was an explosive time. Those first two projects leading up to La Coka Nostra. I mean, you want to talk about that era?
Yeah, I mean, I think what I didn't realize, I didn't do it intentionally, but I think like I was right at the center of the drug epidemic while it was starting to boom. Like everybody was doing hard drugs. It was just like, and I was writing from personal experience in the center of it. And it just kind of started to take on a life of its own. It was, it's so crazy looking back because like trying to think of it chronologically, like it seemed like everything was happening at once. You know what I'm saying? Like, I started working with those guys, and at the same time, The White Man is the Devil and Special Teams, and then, Gone Baby Gone. I mean, it just seemed like it was all like, I guess it took time over those few years, but it all seemed like a blur, like so much of it. And maybe part of that was because I was drunk and high all the time. I look back, it
Yeah.
seems like boom.
Yeah, I mean, that was to me the emergence of you as a solo artist in Boston was that era, Volume 1 and Volume 2. It was like you made your claim. We did some big shows. I mean, that show where you opened up for AZ. I mean, that was to me like Slaine has arrived as a Boston
You sold
artist.
like 100 CDs that night.
Yeah, like
Nobody
that
knew
was,
who I was yet,
and you were crazy, and that was the AZ crowd. That wasn't like your House of Pain crowd. It was the AZ crowd,
Mhm.
and we did tons of shows, and eventually you did that one show, and Chris Ferrone wrote that article, and I believe that's how Ben Affleck heard of you, right? He read the article and you auditioned. Is that how it happened for Gone Baby Gone?
Well, that's what I'm saying. It was kind of all happening at the same
Yeah.
time. So, we had announced that, the Coka, it was basically an article in the Herald was about House of Pain getting back together with,
Yeah.
I think at the time it was like Nonfiction and Lords of Brooklyn and me,
Yep.
and it was just a very, beginning of it. And it had a little bit about me. And I think the Rich Man, Poor Man vinyl came out at the same time. We
Yep.
had a show at McGann's or something. And that's what the article was all about. And at that time, I was squatting in that warehouse, that the studio that they were trying to build the studio in, and the studio, it was just everybody was in so much chaos at that time, like
Yeah, and
from
I'd like to point
Maddie
out,
to
yeah, and shout out Matty Harris, who was engineering all this. But I also want to point out during this whole time, you are broke as shit. Like you don't have a
yeah.
house, you don't have you're getting all this publicity, all this attention, all this. I mean, you're making some money, but you're basically borderline homeless in a warehouse. You don't really have that much money. Any money's going to alcohol and drugs. I mean, this was what was going on at the time. People probably thought it was a lot bigger than it was, but we were all just scraping
Yeah,
by,
I mean,
yourself
and
included.
we were trying to start a different record label at that time with with another partner, and then he got popped, and he was facing like he was looking at time. He had a big case, and then he was out of the picture, and then I was kind of left in that warehouse for like 6 or 8 months. And the crazy thing is, there's no hot water, there's no electricity, and you're right. Now I'm like buzzing, my name is everywhere.
Yeah.
I'm flying out to LA to record with these guys, then coming back to squat in a warehouse. You know what I'm saying? And that was right at that time when the Herald did that article. I remember I walked up the street to, that was on Shirley Street where that where the warehouse was, and I walked up like to the Mobile at Methadone Mile there on Mass Ave, and I grabbed every newspaper on the rack. It was 7 a.m. I had been drinking all night.
Yep.
I was like, I'm in the fucking paper, and I go back and I pass out, and I wake up at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and I got all these missed calls from like Ferrone and 94.5 and the people at the Herald and the casting agency, and they wanted me to come in and audition for Gone Baby Gone.
Yeah.
So it was like
crazy.
I mean, it's, and like there was a lot of work and so much effort. There was a decade of stuff going before that, like starting with those open mics in New York and demo tapes and Chan and all that stuff. And that was like the magic moment where it was like my life was in complete chaos. I was trying to get sober back then, but I just didn't know how. Yeah. Everybody around me that I grew up with was in chaos. Everybody in our circle was in complete, lives were a wreck and in complete chaos. And I'm like at my bottom in so many ways, except all this stuff starts happening at the same time. And then, I end up getting that role in the movie, Affleck cast me in Gone Baby Gone. Next thing you know, like La Coka is really catching fire, and I'm touring around the world with my favorite fucking rap group when I was a kid. I mean, House of Pain was my favorite rap group. Absolutely. I really like looked up to and respected Nonfiction too,
Yep.
And now I'm like on the road touring with these guys. When I shot Gone Baby Gone, dude, I had no hot water, no electricity. I had rashes under my all over my body because the water was so cold. I would like try to take a shower and my son and you know, my high school sweetheart who had kind of kicked me out a couple of years before that, and we broke up, and she, you know, she couldn't believe like where I was at. Like she was like, "Oh my God, what are you doing living here?" And she like rented a hotel room for the night before I shot Gone Baby Gone so that I could get like a hot shower. And she bought me like this whole toiletry bag. And I remember showing up on the set and going to my trailer, and I had like a big bag of toiletries, like a big, you know, and one of the production assistants like, "You don't have to bring all that stuff. Like we have that here. You just tell us what you want and we'll bring it to you." And I was like, oh, all right, thanks.
You had the selfie suitcase and the toiletry bag?
Dude, literally.
You know, what's amazing through all of that, man, I will say, is the amount of drugs and alcohol that was done. You still were able to pull off a lot. Your work ethic, whether it was in a blackout, skied out, whatever, the work got done. Uh, Superhuman power, man. Like, you know, we would go to the studio, and you know, you go to the studio and you'd bang out fucked up 2, 3 joints a night, right? And like that was no problem. Like, and you would do that all the fucking time, drunk, whatever. Like that type of work ethic along with it, man. That's what a lot of people that get that fucked up can't produce like that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, I don't really.
I'm not trying to give it as like I'm not trying to brag about it, but man, it's pretty remarkable that you were able to maintain what you did. I guess is what I'm trying to say is on the amount of drugs and alcohol that was being done. That's all.
How about the fact that, you know, I never like wrapped my car around the fucking pole?
Yeah.
I used to drive around in blackouts.
I think there was a couple minor fender benders, I remember.
I don't remember them. So
yeah, that makes sense.
I know the year I got sober, I got hit by drunk drivers twice while I was sober. I thought that was like karma coming back to me.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, I remember Lou Balls' brother saying that to me. He's like, "Dude, you're like fucking knocked out, like obliterated on the fucking couch, and then you pop up and just go in the booth, and it's like you just spit and it's dope, and then you come back out and you're fucking destroyed again." I don't know.
Yeah, I mean so things start taking off, right? And La Coca's picking up steam, the acting's picking up steam, everything's picking up steam. It gets darker for you, right? From here on, like mentally, personally? Is that?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Right. Let's talk about towards the end of the run of the drugs and alcohol, what was going on.
Oh, I mean, you know, the thing, like, I got back with the high school sweetheart. We got married. We had a baby, my son, and I think like, you know, I was always able to compartmentalize everything. You know what I'm saying? And I think like the drinking and the drugs, you know what it was, is like moving around a lot. Like I was always an outsider. I always felt like an outsider. And I felt like an outsider in hip hop too. You know what I'm saying? Everywhere I ever went, I always felt like an outsider. And I think like the drugs and the alcohol were like my adapter. It helped me like, you know what I mean? Wherever I went, like that was my way to kind of assimilate and get where I needed to get. Like it also like, you know, I have a 12-year-old son now. Like I didn't like when I was growing up, I was in so many fights. Like by the time I was 7 or 8 years old, like I would get my head kicked in and beat up. You know what I'm saying? So I think like that also gave me like, it was liquid courage. Like it gave me it turned the fear down. It turned like anything in my head that said like you can't do it, it turned it off. You know what I'm saying? So like when I drank and I got high, like I was fearless. And I could fight who I need to fight. I could make as many bold moves as I needed to make. And, you know, because I mean, at heart, like I'm really like, you know, you learn things about yourself in sobriety. Like really, I'm a very private person, kind of shy. You know what I'm saying? If you know me and the way that I am now, like I keep to myself. I'm quiet. You know, I'm not loud. And that's kind of my true self. And I think like, you know, with the creative process too, like it turns down any self-doubt for me. I feel like I can do anything. I can accomplish anything when I'm high. And that's what it did for me. You know, so it worked for me in a lot of ways. But the thing is, like once I became a father, and a husband, and I'm trying to have this normal life where I got, I'm really living the American dream at that point, right? On the,
Absolutely.
it's like, that's like Cinderella shit. And, now I have like a nice upper middle class life and an SUV and a child, and I'm trying to be a dad and a husband but I can't do it. You know what I'm saying? I can't compartmentalize it because, it's impossible to do when you're doing the kind of drugs that I was doing and drinking the way that I was drinking. And, it was kind of like I was stuck in between this place where I felt like I needed that shit in order to create. Like I needed
Yeah.
it like that. It's, we do this in hip hop. We create these characters. It's like everybody does that. Like every
Yeah.
MC is like the superhero version of themselves or the supervillain version of themselves, right? And that's kind of what's empowering about hip hop is like we get to put ourselves up into this spot where we create the undefeatable version of ourselves. That's what hip hop is. That's what every MC who ever came out, like you're this, and you have to believe in all that and be that. And I think like, when you took away the drugs and alcohol, like it's very difficult for me to, be that fearless character. And that's why it was really hard for me to let go of the booze and the drugs.
Yeah.
It was really hard.
Tools of the trade,
I thought that I couldn't create. I thought
yep.
that, I thought that was what was giving me my power and my talent and all that. That's the disease. That's like
It's the
what,
illusion. It's the
yeah,
illusion.
man.
It's funny because I got sober a little bit before you, and I remember, you were at the end of it. It was like you were struggling trying to get sober and not get sober, and you used to say that, and I remember. But you also like you really thought it was helping you at sometimes the illusion of that. I remember you telling me that drinking a bottle of vodka, was drinking in safety at night, and.
I mean, my body was revolting against itself where I'd just be walking, I was drinking 2/5 a day. So I'd just be walking
Yeah.
down the street, just throwing up. And at one point I was like, you know what? I'm fucking throwing up every day. It's because I'm mixing my vodka with orange juice.
It's the orange juice.
I need to stop with this fucking orange juice. I'm drinking a gallon of orange juice a day with all this shit. And that's what I did. And then I started drinking it straight. It's just like fucking insanity, dude.
What's the progression of it, right?
And that's where it gets dark because, then it becomes like drinking and using just to function and just you're medicating, you're self-medicating. And how can I function without my medicine?
Yeah.
But then at the same time, like, how can I be,
Slaine? How can I be Slaine? Because you created this Slaine character, which was 99 bottles, drugs, alcohol, Irish, rah, rah, rah. How can I do this sober? How can I be this guy sober? I mean, that was a tough transition. Some artists, it's not maybe as hard as far as the character goes, but your character, man, I mean, you're talking about a total 180. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well,
and
it was authentic. I always wrote authentically to where I was at, like, with the drugs and the booze and all that. Like that, those records are time capsules. And as much as they make me cringe to listen to them now sometimes, I'm proud of the work, but there's stuff that I listen to and I'm like, that's lazy writing. You talk about like, making 3 songs in a night. Well, it's like if you get hung up on a line and you just fill in and keep going, like I don't do that now. You know what I'm saying? Like, so I hear like the Xanax and the booze slur,
the slur,
some of these old, and I know some people love that shit and God bless, great. You know what I'm saying? But like when and some of the things that I would say and all that, like I would never, that's not me now, but they're time capsules to where I was. And that was authentically where I was at that time. So, I really can't knock it. That's just I'm glad I'm not there anymore.
Yeah. So what was the moment where after all the times of trying to get sober and all this gigantic run of drugs and alcohol, what was the moment of clarity that finally made you say, I got to do this?
I mean,
for real,
and I work with a lot of people trying to get sober now. So here's the paradox of it: is there were 1,000 moments like that,
right?
and I was
Which was the one.
and I was unable to do it. And there are 1,000 moments where I should have, and some of them were like, "Hey, man, you got a fucking movie role." You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, and I was like able to stay sober from a lot of those chances, like for a short window of time, enough to like get by. But and then there were consequences, and there were nothing was ever enough. Like there was nothing, and I think like the thing that fucking pierced through and like broke my heart was like that I realized like I wasn't going to be able to be the father that I wanted to be. And I always like shy away from doing like podcast. I know you asked me to do this like fucking 6 months ago. I'm so much more comfortable talking about these things in my music. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I think if you listen to One Day and you listen to like my new stuff, you can hear all this stuff. Like my whole story is in my records. Right. But yeah, like there was just a moment where I knew that I'm gonna share in a general way when I speak here, and I open up fully in the music. So it's like, there was a moment where I realized that I am not the father that I want to be, and I had to do everything in my power to change that, even if it meant, surrendering the fact that I had to make music for a living. Like when I got sober this time, I was like, all right, maybe I can't do this. You know what I'm saying? Like, because it was my belief system was so tied into the fact that I need this shit in order to create. And, if this is going to be the thing because I always put music first. I used to tell people in my life, like, you'll always be second to this. You know what I'm saying? Like people that should have never said that to. I mean, you know what I'm saying? Like my fucking like selfish fucking dream. You know what I'm saying? Was the most fucking important thing to me at the expense of any and everything around me.
Well, there's a level of that you almost kind of need to break through in the music business. There's that narcissistic, I'm going to fucking make it by any means, because you get so many doors slammed and you shut face and all this other stuff. You kind of almost need that edge, but once you get to a certain point, you got to learn to balance that out. But some people don't necessarily do it. I mean, you're fucking drunk and high all the time. It can only accelerate that sometimes.
Yeah, and like, I mean, you're right. You need such a fierce belief that this is what's going to happen, and that there's nothing that's going to stop you. Like you need that in spades in order to break through. But it's like it worked for me until it didn't.
Right.
And it's the same thing. It's the same thing with booze and drugs, man. Like it worked for me. But I don't even, there might have even been a point in time where the booze and drugs saved my life. You know what I'm saying? Like it empowered me in a certain way, and it made me okay. Like where I didn't have to deal with all this stuff that I wasn't ready to deal with. You know what I'm saying? Like traumatic stuff.
You hear that sometimes.
It saved me before it almost killed me. But then it worked until it stopped working. You know what I'm saying? And it didn't mean that I didn't keep getting drunk and high. Like I hear people say that, and I don't relate, because it always worked for me. Like I always got super high and super drunk. It never stopped working like that. But what it stopped working like was it stopped serving me in the way that it used to. And then it just got really dark, and it started to be a lot of like, I was losing things. I was losing myself. I was losing things that I loved. And it was, I really think that only fear of love can get you sober. And I had a good dose of both of those this time. And I was just willing to, like I said, I felt like I had to surrender making music. Like I was willing to give it up in order to be a good father to my son. And I just worked at that a day at a time, and it was fucking really fucking hard for a long time, man. And and I just, I followed what a lot of people in sobriety told me to do, and there was I learned humility. In other words, like the world fucking humbled me. So as much as I got all that amazing stuff, like, and it was like magic, like I got a good healthy dose of fucking, of humility through failure, and having to look at like some of the things that I did and the ways that I behaved and how I needed to change. Yeah, man. And then, go ahead.
Let's talk about some of the challenges you had sober early, because there was some few ones. Like, How many days sober were you doing your first show?
10 days at the Viper Room in LA.
Damn. Now, if that ain't a true test right here, the Viper Room where River Phoenix died, a few others, you know, talk about that. That must have been
Well, the thing
grueling.
is, I did a show at the Viper Room when I was still getting high, like shortly before that, and I remember like I couldn't breathe when I was on stage. I was having like
Yeah.
a real bad trip that night, and like when I got off stage, I was like stumbling outside, like I felt like like my heart was gonna stop or something. And I looked over, and there's like a thing for River Phoenix there or whatever,
Yeah.
and I remember bugging out like, oh fuck, like this would,
Yeah.
But yeah, the first show back, 10 days sober, and I remember, Right Hook went with me on that tour, and he was sober, and I made it through 6 shows for St. Patty's, like that St. Patty's run sober,
Yeah.
and then I had a tour with Swollen members booked after that,
Yeah.
and I remember, talking to a good friend of mine in the program, and he was like, bro, like you got to put the insurance policy on yourself. Like you're sober right now, but like you're gonna go do 30 shows. Like that, you think that's best for you? And that's where the surrender part with the music came in.
Right.
And like a long process of that, dude, is like when you start to get notoriety from this shit, and that becomes your self worth. Like I can't make who I'm worth based on like what other people think, or based on like how hot my career is, or how well the record does, or what movie it is. You know what I'm saying? Like
Yep.
that shit is just, that's extra, man. That's not like, I had to learn in sobriety, like what really makes or breaks me is like how good of a father I can be, how good of a friend I could be, how good of a man I can be. You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? And not put everything into like
Career.
career shit and my ambitions, because like that
Yeah.
ambition becomes a character defect, man. Because if you're
Yeah. It
that
does.
ambitious where anything, the ends justify the means always, that's like the definition of a shitty person. So you'll do anything to get where you got to go. Like fuck that, man. And
Yeah.
I think like one of the my values changed, and what I value changed,
Yeah.
and one of those values is like privacy. You know what I'm saying? And one of those values is like putting other people in front of myself, especially people that I love, and that's like kind of the key to this shit for me.
No. Ambition, you talk about it because it's, you know, your career and your career and ambition, it's made to be like you have to be this way, like it's all or nothing. We always think that it's all or nothing. And then so many people can't get sober because of my job, or I can't do this, or I can't do that. And that really trips a lot of people up from getting clean because I can't leave work to go to detox or stuff like that. But the reality is, ambition will turn against you, and it will
Yeah, and the
take
thing is
and it'll
like,
take it'll take away your family that
and
quick.
absolutely. And the thing is, like, when you're an addict and an alcoholic at that level, I mean, you're gonna lose everything anyways. You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Like, you're not gonna have a life to come back to if you don't take care of your shit. And
Right.
over the course of time, like, and it took a while, man. I mean, I recorded early on. I mean, this guy here with me, Archetype, I know he's been on the show before too. Like, I believe like in the power of the universe, and and putting situations and people in your life at the right time. I don't know that I could have done any, like, built myself back creatively without him.
Yeah. And I
Like,
totally agree with that. I mean, you need, a good MC needs a good producer. Bottom line, someone's got to make the music, and Arc, I think you guys aligned right at the right time.
but it's even more than that though, because it's like there were moments in my early sobriety where I'd come into the studio and it was just sense memory. Like if I can't write, like I take a sniff, or
Yep.
or I drink some whiskey or whatever. Like that gets me in my spot.
Yep.
And I would feel like I needed to do that, and then I would have to leave the studio, or like I would hear a verse back in the headphones and be like, "This sucks. Run it
Yeah.
back again. run it back again, run it back again, run it back again. Like, and it's just not good enough, and it's not good enough, and it's never gonna fucking be good enough. You know what I'm saying? Like that real, like
Yeah.
self-loathing shit. And that was the fucking, that's what I was drinking and getting high to turn that voice down.
So you had like a bad dialogue you would say about yourself in your head.
Always. It's never
Yeah.
good enough. It's
Right.
never good enough. You know what I'm
I
saying?
th-
And that, I mean,
Nothing's good enough.
I think that's like at the bottom of, you know, you see this across the board with a lot of super famous people. It's like, how much is enough? Like, how much, you know, because I know really fucking famous people, and that shit to me sometimes can look like a prison. You know what I'm
It
saying?
is.
You can't, you know, go to Target. You can't fucking, you know what I'm saying? Like, I don't want that. You know what I'm saying? So it's like, but when we have this addict mentality, or it's like, if I do this, then it'll be good enough. Then it'll be, but you get there and it ain't good enough neither. Like you need
Yeah.
bigger, more, more. It's
Yeah.
like, you know,
That was always my thing. You know, I set the finish line and then just keep pushing it back and pushing it back and pushing it back and just screwing up everything around me. It was always
or
the case.
setting the standard here. And then
Yeah.
when you fall just short, destroying yourself internally. You know what I'm
Do you
saying?
do you think that that type of, I'm just going to say fear, doubt, and insecurity, um, fuels a perfectionism in you?
Yeah, but I think so. So this, I was afraid to let go of that. Like so, like I said, so the creative process, and I couldn't have done it without Archetype. And I think like he's seen from, if
Yeah.
anybody could tell you, like he's seen from day one until now.
Yeah.
And I think like I thought that, well, what happens if you take that away? That's my edge, but it's not. I think like if I create out of the same power of that universe, and I write authentically where I'm at now, and I don't worry about like, well, I got to live up to this, or you know, it was the truth of where I was at then. If I write the truth of where I'm at now, it doesn't not fit. It fits perfectly, actually. You
Right.
know what I'm saying?
It's
And if I,
honest.
yeah, and it's it's the opposite, because when I'm writing with that perfectionism and I need to get it done right now and it needs to be the greatest thing ever, then that actually makes the work suffer. Because if I just write half a song and I drive around and listen to it for 2 weeks until the next part comes to me, and then I can put it together and really craft it and make sure I mean everything I say in the exact way, and that, you know, it's all put together the right way. That's actually the quality of work. The only thing that anything great can ever be achieved from the three modalities are acceptance, enthusiasm, and enjoyment. And enthusiasm is just enjoyment with a goal. You know what I'm
Hmm.
saying? So it's like that only can be created in the present moment. So if I'm in the future, in the past, like I'm fucked. I need to
Yeah.
be, you know, like a lot. What I realized is like making music is like is a meditation for me, because I'm completely in the present moment when
Right.
I'm doing it at the level that I can do it at, and I'm narrowed in and focused. Now, if I get out of that, that's where I'm throwing the headphones and this ain't good enough and all that, because then I'm tying an expectation for it. And like another one of the things I learned is like, why am I making music with an expectation of what it's going to do for me? How about what I can
Right.
do for it? You know what I'm
Right.
saying? Like the music should be uncorrupted by like by by money or prestige or property or anything. Like it should just be the truth about where I'm at today, and I
Yeah.
should just be in that moment. And then if people fuck with it, great. If they don't, I don't give a fuck. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Who cares? Like it has nothing to do with anything else.
Do you find that, I mean, obviously the creative process is significantly longer now, right? Being sober. How much longer is it versus what it used to be?
It feels a lot longer because I don't go home with like I don't stay in the studio till 7 a.m. and then fucking drive home drunk with three brand new songs. But
Do you still play it 50 times in a row after you're
no,
done
I
making
don't, and I don't make other
it?
people listen to it or
Just
none
for the
of
record, Slaine would make you listen to whatever he recorded 50 times in a row, drunk and high.
that.
It was like pure insanity. Anyone that's witnessed that will agree to that. There were
Yeah,
always good
just
tracks, but after 50 times, you get a little
yeah,
sick and
just the
tired of it.
ultimate of like self-absorption, right? So
It's
it's
all
like
about me. But
yeah, man.
but the shit was all dope, so we all loved it. We all loved seeing move forward and everything. And do you have people that are like, I don't like any of the new shit. I like the old Slaine. Do you get that?
There's some people, but I think there's some people that, and then particularly like in the beginning when the transition kind of happened.
Yeah.
What I think now, I see the opposite. I see people like, you know, saying I mean, the reality is, what I was going to finish saying is, it seems like I'm recording at a slower clip, but when I look back, the releases are all, I mean, like the releases are strong and consistent, just like, you know, in the past. It just seemed like there was a higher volume of work, I think. And I
Well,
was
I
putting,
think you were recording more. You weren't releasing more, but you were recording more. I mean, you were doing features. You do what, I mean, you just show up because the booze and the coke was there and then throw a verse. You had no intention of doing that on your way over there. You know,
yeah,
that
and
just happened.
I would throw away fucking half the shit I recorded. I mean, like
Yeah.
some of the stuff that me and Archetype dig up and listen to. I mean, you know, the verse I did for XL's album,
Yeah.
originally it was like, you might want, do you want to do this again before we put this out? You're slurring. You
Yeah.
know what I'm saying? I mean, there's a
Yeah.
ton of shit like that. So it's like, we don't really throw away too much anymore. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? Because it's well thought out and
Because
it's
you're
put
not
together.
drunk and slurring on the record.
Exactly. And it's like, you know, it's not just, part of that stuff is like the earliest stuff, a lot of it was stream of consciousness and just throwing shit at the wall. And now there's like a purpose behind it. And as we start to like get a collection of songs, then we start to see what the record is about. You know what I'm saying? And then it's like, oh shit, this is what this is about. This is where I'm at. It's almost like a vehicle. It's crazy because it was the biggest trigger for me, drinking and getting high. But now it's like a vehicle for my recovery. Now it's a way for me to see where I'm at and to see some hard truths. You know what I'm saying? There's still stuff that I put out in songs. That last video where I'm like, oh God, why am I putting that out publicly? You know what I'm saying? Like there's stuff in there that's tough. That's one of the biggest things I struggle with. You know, is like, because I use it as such a personal, it's such a personal vehicle for my own like psyche and my own self-analysis. Like to put that out publicly sometimes is like difficult.
Yeah, but I think it helps you though.
Yeah, I think
I think
so.
if you didn't, you know, it'd be more detrimental. Let's talk about this last record, you know, Things We Can't Forgive. What was your mindset? What was the process behind this one?
Well, like I said, that we kind of looked at that after. I was just like, you know, I was going through a really difficult time, like, and you know, I was heartbroken, and
In a difficult time, this wasn't a sobriety difficult time. This was personal relationship
yeah,
situation,
this
right?
was like love and attachment, and some loss, and I mean, it's all in there. Like I said, I'm more comfortable talking about it on the record, which is sick and weird, but
It's fine.
yeah, but I mean, it's all in there. You can hear it all, but it's really about like love and attachment, narcissism, trauma. And ultimately, like, I think we had all these songs, and then the last one we recorded was this video that we put out. And I think what I started to realize, it was a process that I went through in my life to finally forgive myself for all this, you know, wreckage and all the things that I did, and be like, you know, you were doing the best you can with the tools you had at that time. And you're not that way anymore, and it's time to let that shit go. So it was a very cathartic record for me, man. Probably the most cathartic record in my entire catalog, you know?
Yeah, and I like the video how you start off the first verse and it's like the, you know, fucking angry, you know, and then the second verse is like the serene, you know,
Yeah.
like the coming to grips with thing, and that's just such a miracle that sobriety can give, is to come to grips with things and feel comfortable or somewhat comfortable in your own skin, and find that truth and accept yourself for who you are, good, bad, and ugly, you know, and
Yeah.
that's what that song, you know. That's what we all need to do in some point, is find that truth, you know?
Yeah, I think when we finished that record, I you know, I looked at Archetype and I was like, are people going to listen to this? Are people going to fuck with this? This is like so much different than anything I'd ever done. Like it was you know, I think it probably a lot of vulnerability in all my records, but I think this one was really cut to a different core, you know?
Yeah.
So
I mean, I love that hook because you used that hook. That's from Ghosts,
yeah, I brought it back. You know, I
which I've always
tweaked
got.
it a
I've
little bit.
always come on you as like, you got to do Ghost live, and you're like, I don't know, I don't know
I
how
don't
to do
have
it.
the instrumental, bro. You know,
Fucking
so
have Archetype may remake it. I don't care. That's a friggin' banger. Well, now you can
yeah,
do this one live.
there's a lot of that early stuff is lost, like in
Yeah.
Lou's old computer. I mean, you know, for people who don't know, like Lou blew up. Like he's producing, like he's the
Yeah.
biggest producer in the world.
Yeah, let's talk about that. You worked Louis Bell, who is Post Malone and many other commercial producers. He was working with him as Louis Blue Balls. He's from
Blue balls.
Quincy.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that experience real quick. We'll go back a little bit. How
So,
was it working with him?
yeah. So, you know, if I really believe in like the producer relationship, like I like
Yep.
to work with one producer. I like to work, I mean, it's because the music is so personal. It feels very odd to me to like bring random people in or just get beats off the internet. Like I
Yep.
don't mean to be a dick when people are like, hey, where can I send you beats? I just don't. I mean, part of the process for me is to sit in the studio. I'll come in with a verse half written and archetype will build the beat around it. You know what I'm saying? So it's like,
Yep.
it's very, the writing process goes together with what the producers do and not separate and then pick
Right.
through beats. I just don't operate like that. Really, the producers I've worked with the most are like Archetype, Static Selector, Lethal, and Lou. And all those relationships are very like
Maddie.
Maddie. Yeah, early on Maddie too.
Yep.
And
Maddie.
all those, I have personal relationships with all of those people where they really know who I am and I know them, and we speak a
Yeah.
similar creative language that we've developed over time. So it feels like it
Yeah.
doesn't feel right to me any other way.
Right.
And Lou and me and Lou had very much had a relationship like that where it was like I would come in with like a melody idea and he was just, I used to tell people like I got a nuclear weapon at my
Yeah.
disposal. This dude is a genius, and
Yeah.
he is. I mean, that's
Yeah.
kind of been proven now too. But I think it's funny, like a lot of people who listen to my music don't know, like I Ain't Done was produced by the same
Yeah.
dude
Blue Bell.
who does like Miley Cyrus and
Yeah.
Post Malone, and you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. I mean, I always knew he was good. I didn't see that one coming. I mean, I guess
Well,
it was because
who could see? I mean, nobody could see it coming to the level where, I mean, this dude like is literally the biggest producer in the
I
world. Like,
know. He's winning awards every other day.
but I knew that he had. I mean, I knew that he was incredibly gifted. I work
Yeah.
with a lot of talented people, and he's, you know, incredibly talented.
Yeah. I guess I didn't see it so much because, you know, you were more rapping, you know what I mean? Like versus, you know, he works with all these crazy singers. I didn't realize his songwriting ability and working with melodies as much as now I see it now, you know.
But you know, but I think you know all those producers that I named, like the
Yeah.
primary people that I've worked with throughout my career, are all that talented.
Yep.
You know what I'm saying? So when you hear my music, like, and that's why I said recently when we put this out, my name is on the cover of this record, but this is Archetype's record too, man. And
Absolutely.
like, you know, when you work with a producer like that, and it's the process, like, there's no, you know, I've had great production, not good production. I've had great production throughout my career, and all these guys are
And
on
now
the
that's
same level, like whether it's Lethal or Static or Archetype or Lou, they're all, to me, like I've worked with all of them. I know how they get down. They're all incredibly talented people.
and let's not forget you've worked with DJ Premier on how many joints? 3?
Three, yeah. I mean, yeah, of course, Primo, bro.
Yeah, forgot about that one, huh?
I didn't
Let's
forget
talk.
about
Let's
that.
talk about the first time you met Primo
I
at
met Primo when we did the
the
special
record
team.
store.
We
No, you
did.
met him at the record
Oh
store.
yeah.
Talk
All
about the
right. So the
record store.
first time I met Primo was at
Yeah.
Moment of Truth record signing at Tower Records. I stood out. I was wearing a leather jacket. It was raining, and I stood in line for like an hour and a half. And when I got to the front, Guru, rest in peace of Guru, one of my favorite MCs of all time, he was
Yep.
there. Big Suge was there, and Primo was there, and they all signed my shit. And I told Primo, I'm going to work with you one day. And he's like, oh, you think you got it like that? And I said, yeah. And then when I saw him in the studio, so 6 years later, and we went to do main event with special teams, and I told him, I said, I told you 6 years ago that I was going to work with you one day. And he's like, he goes, now you're here, motherfucker. What are you going to do with it?
And you killed that verse. You mean you really put the Boston accent on a DJ Premier beat.
Yo, and the crazy thing is we were on tour like a year or two later, and we were in England, and Primo was there, and he was at the same venue, and Melly Mel was there, and Primo was like,
So,
oh, Melly, you got to hear this kid. He got the Boston accent. He started spitting my verse to Melly Mel. My head exploded. My head exploded, bro. I was like,
Melly Mel too, man.
insanity. There's just so many moments like that, man. Like, you know,
You did have a lot of moments.
there was so
Still
many
have
moments
moments.
where it was like, wow. You know what I'm saying? Like, it's even now looking back at it, it feels surreal. You know what I mean? Like, I really am grateful. Like, through all the ups and downs, it was a beautiful thing, man. I lived my dream. And even when it got really dark and hard, like that shit made me grow eventually. It made me a better man. And you know, I have no regrets for the way it went. For any of it, I'm super grateful and happy to still be making music at a high level and in the place that I'm at right now. I just, you know, I feel content in that, and I say that not in a bad or a lazy way. Like I feel like I have more purpose now than ever before, and like the freedom not to be tied to, you know, I need the next big thing to happen or this, that, or, you know, like I'm not driven by that anymore.
Yeah.
That's a beautiful thing.
Nothing to prove.
I mean, you know, if anything that I have to prove, it's to other people who are struggling, whom I might be of service to, I might be able to help, and maybe my story can help them, and maybe, you know what I'm saying? Because that was part of what kept me out there a long time. Is I thought, like, I can never do this sober. I could never do that, you know what I'm, and that's a fucking lie, man. That shit was
Yeah.
always inside of me, and actually I could do it better sober. You know what I'm saying? So that's what I have to prove, is like that the old man still got it, that I'm still sharp, you know?
Speaking of still got it, what projects you working on now? What you got coming up?
I'm working on an album with Static Selector called A New State of Grace. So if anybody remembers the mixtape we did called State of Grace, this one's called A New State of Grace, and it's going to be phenomenal. I'm super excited to work with Static again. I love Static, and we're also, you know, working on a new Coka Nostra record. So I'm excited about that too. Happy birthday, Ill Bill! It was Bill's birthday today, and it was the 12-year anniversary of A Brand You Can Trust.
And I just go back to the La Coka Nostra days. That one show that when we did this, your Volume 2 release party and Ill Bill's, I think it was featured. I forget the name of his mixtape at the time, and you guys brought in Everlast as a surprise guest. Man, that was
We brought
a great
the whole
show.
crew, bro.
Yeah, you brought the whole La Coka Nostra.
That was a great show, man. I forgot that's what it was. It was for the White Man is the Devil Volume 2. And
yeah, man. It was at the time, like Everlast, you know, he was kind of MIA, and he wasn't really rapping, and now he comes back to the Middle East as a surprise guest, rapping with you guys at the Middle East, doing Jump Around in Boston. It was like, what?
It was.
And I only been promoting shows for like a year or two at the time. I was like, whoa, bro.
And you remember how excited I was when my name was up on the marquee at the Western Front, which is, like, you know, the Western Front. But it all in its right place, man. And you know, Everlast was one of my heroes, man. And now, you know, all those guys in the Coka, they're just, I mean, like I've really learned so much, and I think it really sharpened my sword. You saw it, you know what I'm saying? Like the level where I was going into that, into, you know, fast forward 5-6 years down the line, just working with dudes who are that talented and that skilled and that have their whole shit honed in like that, and also have a knowledge of the game and the business that goes back years. You know what I'm saying? And that legacy of the lineage that these guys all came from in hip hop, like, I mean, what an honor and a blessing to be tied to that and to be mentored by that, and to really, you know, come up under people that I not only respected. I had these guys on my wall, man. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, I remember doing shows with House of Pain with La Coka, where it was like, oh, they're gonna do some House of Pain songs, and Everlast being like, yo, how does the first verse go on? He's asking me about his own joint, and I'm like, boom, and I know the shit. You know what I'm saying? So it was like I said, a dream come true.
And I want to go back to take another story back of when Everlast recorded that first song with you before La Coka. You know, when you guys went out, you know, you guys went back to Lethal's, and he just kind of got on one of your tracks and just kind of he just put the verse together in his head. He didn't write anything down, right? Is that how it went?
He's never written anything down.
Yeah,
he writes every verse in his head.
And he smokes mad weed.
I mean, I don't know. I don't comment on other people's stuff like that.
Well, I mean, he's pretty open about it.
Yeah, but
I'm just saying he can remember this.
Yeah, but he has apparently like a photographic memory, so I think you'd have to ask him, but I think he writes it in his head and he can just see it still.
That's
I could
crazy.
never, you know.
That's crazy, man.
This baffles me. I know like Jay-Z does that too, supposedly, and I know like there's other people who do that. I just I have to like jot down words and ideas, and I don't know if you remember like when I used to actually write on pen and paper and like
I did.
scratch
Used to
every.
leave. Yeah, used to leave them at my house, and they were all fucking words and crossed out and crazy shit.
Yeah. Well, the phone, that was the beautiful, because what happened was I would like black out and lose songs. I'd be so pissed off. You know what I'm
Yeah,
saying? Like, fuck, I
yeah,
wrote a whole song and I
yeah.
don't know where it is. So the phone, like you always got it with you. So, and it also takes away from the scribbling out and all that. I can just delete and have it be a nice, easy thing to read.
So real quick, between two House of Pain fans, what's your favorite House of Pain album?
Second one.
Interesting. Why so?
I mean, the first one was classic, obviously, but the second one to me, it just was driving the whole way. I love the production on it. I like the stories on it. It was just it's a great record. I like the first one and the third one too. I know your answer. You like the third one.
I just like where Everlast on the third one is his. It was just such a dark time, and it was just you could tell where it was going and the sound and everything. I love the second one. I love them all, but the third one for some reason, just I connected with that type of mind state that he was in on that one.
Yeah, yeah, that
That
was
was
a
where I
dark
was
one,
at.
and he had that extra growl. That record.
Yeah, his voice was just like, "Here come the, here come the," you know what I mean?
I
It
mean,
was just like,
I fuck with
wow.
all those records, man. I fuck with all the
Yeah,
House Band records. I think they're
yeah,
really, I don't think they're underrated by the fans, but I think like they should really be put up higher in hip hop history than I see them get. You know what I'm saying? They're really like one of the great legacy acts in hip hop to me.
yeah. And the reality is that I remember watching MTV and them being like, "House of Pain is a one hit wonder," and
That's
they were
insane to me
three
because,
albums in at the time. I was like,
yeah,
"Oh, this is crazy."
I mean, I guess in the pop world, like if you're going by pop singles, which, Jump Around really wasn't a pop single. It just blew up like that. It's one of the biggest songs in hip hop history.
Yeah,
But I mean, how many pop singles did Gangstar have? That doesn't take away from their legacy of how,
yeah,
how many great albums they had. So,
yeah. Cypress Hill too.
Cypress Hill, and
Yeah,
also one of the best live shows in hip hop. I love watching Cypress Hill.
absolutely. High or not? High
Yeah,
or not?
bro, I've gotten to see them more sober than I did high, and that was the first show I ever went to was House of Pain Cypress Hill in Fitchburg, Massachusetts,
Fitchburg, Mass.
in a
That's
hockey rink
crazy.
in Fitchburg, Mass, when I was 15 years old, and there was no police in the building. It
Yeah.
was crazy. It was a crazy show.
Wow.
And it was Funk Dubious and Alchemist and Scotty Khan. What was the name of that group? Why am I drawing
Oh,
a blank?
yeah, I remember that one. I remember there being a group. I don't remember the name though.
Oh, I
That's
can't believe I
that's
forget the name right now. It's crazy.
cool. Well, Slave, we're gonna wrap this up, man. I really appreciate you giving us the time today, and the show. We got the show coming next Friday. It's gonna be good to get back, get the whole gang together. I'm
Yeah,
sure
I
you're
got like
excited.
2 years of pent up energy that I need to get out that night. So I'm looking forward to seeing everybody. It's going to be a special night.
Yeah.
We got my dear old friend XL, who really plugged me in back in the day,
Yeah.
and who's remained my good friend. And he's a dope MC. His music that he's making now is amazing. OT the Real, who's like making a lot of noise. He's up and coming. And then Master Ace was one of also my favorite people to see live. He puts on a great show, and I'm looking forward to going out there and rocking it, man. The first time ever at the Sinclair, too. I've heard it's an
Yeah.
incredible room. The sound system is
Beautiful.
great, so I'm excited.
Cool. I will see you there, and I want to thank everybody for tuning in to the Leeds Edutainment podcast with my man Slaine, and I'll catch you soon, brother.
All right, later, brother.
But